with the arm, when we look at training the arm, when we look at the anatomy of the arm, there's a couple different things that I want to look at that we really need to understand. So when we looked at the shoulder, when we looked at all the different movements, flexion, extension, abduction, internal and external rotation, when we look at the arm, we have to understand how it all ties in to the shoulder and all the different movements that we can run with in terms of how they function as stabilizers, and then how they act kind of downstream from the shoulder. So we had our pecs, we're going to take those away. We're going to take away the deltoids. We're going to take away the pec minor. We're going to go to the back side here, rotate this around. We're going to take away serratus, there we go. Take away some of that rotator cuff. So, let's do that. So when we look at training the arm, one of the things we need to look at is looking at, we're going to start here in the front. So we have three different, like, quote unquote, bicep muscles. So we have the biceps brachii, right? So bi2. So we have a long head, which is here on the outside, and then we have a short head, which is on the inside. It looks kind of funny because the short head doesn't act, it's not actually shorter than the long head. The long head is here on the outside, mainly because it's how long the tendon is. So if you notice, this is what's called the bicipital groove that's right up there. You can see that tendon of the long head coming in, and then the short head of the tendon. So those actually, the bicep actually attaches to your shoulder blade. So when we look at all the different motions, shoulder blade position is going to be crucial in training the biceps. Then we can look at the coracobrachialis, which is down here underneath. So let's cut away the biceps. There we go. So now you can see that a little bit better. It attaches in the middle of the humerus. So when we look at, and then we can look here, right, brachialis. When we look at the coracobrachialis, that's really actually going to act as flexion of the shoulder. Could be considered part of the shoulder, but we're going to consider it part of the arm as well. Regular brachialis. So that's going to do a lot of, if you look at somebody flexing their bicep, the smaller the brachialis, the smaller that ball, or really the shorter that ball looks in terms of how big their arm is. On the backside, on the posterior, we have two different tricep heads. So we have really three. It depends on how you really, it sounds crazy because there's three muscles that actually go in here, but when you look at them from an overview, they look like two. If we cut them away, that's when you start to see down in here the third one. So you have three heads. You have a lateral head, you have a medial head, which is underneath, and then you have the long head. Now notice this long head attaches on the border of that scapula. So when we look at then training the long head of the tricep, we're going to look at shoulder position again. So long head of the bicep tendon, short head of the bicep tendon. We're looking at shoulder blade position, how that's going to impact and how that's going to change the function. Same thing is going to happen with the triceps. How we change the shoulder blade position is going to dictate how much length and tension we can create on it. Then we can cut those away. So then, cut it away. There we go. Then we get into, coming back. Then we have that medial head. Triceps, they function to extend the elbow, especially biceps bring the elbow to you, or flex the elbow. Extension of the elbow happens with the triceps. Then we have this tiny little one down here. This one's a little bit of a harder target to get, but this is your anconeus. Also functions to straighten out the elbow, but it kind of functions right in the very, very end. If we were to cut all these away, we start to see the elbow being this really interesting joint, right? So we can just cut all these muscles away. We start to see, there we go. We start to see all the different things that we can have happen with the elbow, especially because of the way it's shaped. So it doesn't like to go side to side. That's where our radius will take in our forearm. When we look at forearm musculature, we're not going to talk about the forearm as much because there's so many different things that go into the forearm, right? Like your supinator, that just literally rotates the ulna and the radius and how they interact with each other. We started to get into the extensors, basically which is down in the hand. So all of these muscles really come down into your hand and basically they're tendons. So This one, the palmaris longus, all the way from the elbow. We'll actually show you in class how to do that, basically to see where it is on yourself. When we look at training the forearm, it's going to be really talking about grip strength, and most of that is done by gripping stuff, by tackling stuff. So, like in terms of like carrying stuff around when I say tackling stuff, but you get what I mean. Understanding really when we're going to look at a lot of these different muscles, when we're looking at a lot of these different muscle groups, two things are going to be really, now if we look down here, how everything interacts. Like I said, the forearm is very complex. When we start to look at, pronators, supinators, flexors, the big thing we have to realize, and let's see if I can turn the muscles off. Let's see, go the other way. No, okay. If we were to cut away everything down here and we start to look at the radius and the ulna, then we start to realize basically where insertions and origins happen on the radius and ulna. Changing that position is going to change how these different muscles are going to be affected. So when we looked at the shoulder, particularly the posterior shoulder, changing supination and pronation changed the length-tension relationship we could work at with the shoulder, changing how different muscles acted based on how they also function with the biceps. So really, when we look at it, there's a lot going on in the arms. It doesn't seem like much, but at the same time, training for the arms is very, very simple. It's really just going to be about tackling the different ways and the different reasons behind why we select